Matt Brown, Extra Points. Always love to have Matt on the show on many things. He covers so much of the business, but also, my God, maybe even wins and losses too. Matt, thank you, buddy. Appreciate your time. There's so much going on. What have you thought, or what has been your reaction to the SEC distributing today how good they are, that they are a grueling conference? They have a lot of the championships and titles or whatever, but it almost seems like they're being, or feel like they're being mistreated. The poor SEC.
I do not have in my office a violin small enough to play to demonstrate how I feel about the poor, misjudged SEC. I legitimately think something has broken the brains of coaches and administrators in this conference after being used to being such a dominant force really for the last 15 years. And you go 2 years without playing for a national championship. And you were, in my estimation, maybe you guys disagree, but I significantly down, I think, from last year. Still probably the best conference in the country, but not leagues better than everybody else, like it might have been in 2014, 15, 16. And they're just completely unable to cope with that. To sit here, right after the SEC gets 26 teams in the college baseball tournament and 18 in the College World Series or whatever it is, and it gets everybody but one team in the men's basketball tournament, and is still going to get the most spots in the college football playoff. To say we had to hire Navigate to print out an 8-page PowerPoint to send to everybody that shows that we're so much better than the ACC, I think that is loser behavior. And it's disappointing.
Matt, I'm looking over that stuff and I'm thinking like, okay, so it looks like 5 plus 11 is what has got the momentum right now. And the details to be worked out will be ninth conference games and all those things.
Sure.
So let's just operate under the fact that 5-11 is going to happen. None of the stuff that they put out affects any of this at all, given the fact they've got a 25-year PR mission that's kind of put them in the spot. Like, it's superfluous information. Not only that, it's intellectually dishonest to think that their strength of schedule wasn't what almost got a 3-loss team in last year in Alabama. Like, that's where the argument is lost on me, is that none of that's true.
It's arguing for the sake of arguing, I guess. And I do understand that, hey, it's late May and we're all talking about the SEC, whereas the Big Ten agrees with almost everything that Sankey's been putting out. But Big Ten leadership's been afraid to get in front of a microphone and sound like a Bond villain and in front of everybody else, right? Like, I think if we want to be disparaging, there's just as much frustration needs to go to Rosemont as anything else in the SEC. Mm-hmm. But I agree. And this, I think, is an important point, right? Whether you're a fan or a coach or an administrator or anything else, we have to be really careful when you talk about strength of schedule in college football, as if it is a single, knowable, completely statistically valid metric. I feel pretty confident about strength of schedule metrics that are directionally valid for college basketball or baseball, where we have 30, 40, 50 plus data points. You don't have that in college. And we may have even less of that if the SEC moves towards a 9-game schedule, or potentially 9 games plus some sort of Big Ten scheduling arrangement. It becomes this massive circular argument. Well, my schedule was so difficult because I had to play all these fancy SEC teams. And those that fancy SEC teams, well, they played other fancy SEC teams. So, of course, they're good. But if you have such a small amount of intersectional play, and we're trying to build these databases and directories essentially off of 9 games in September, they're not going to be really robust results. It's frustrating to me to see the same, I think, really dumb and mathematically unsound arguments that were floating around about Indiana last year are being relitigated again, just because a team that got their teeth kicked in by a bad Oklahoma squad didn't make the playoff. Just win your games. And if, oh my gosh, it's so hard to win all of our games because everybody here is so good. Well, that's why you have an $11 gajillion television contract. That's why you all have spaceships for your athletic facilities here. That's what the money's for. The money is so you have all the resources you need to be able to beat Missouri. I don't want to hear anybody complain about how hard that is.
Matt, what do you think about Brett Yormark going on the record and saying that he's in favor of 5+11, which would just guarantee the one champ? And then he basically said it like, we got to go out and win. And I appreciate that. I know there's also, you could have guaranteed yourself 2, but what do you think about the choice and the dilemma that he had there and the direction that he's going?
The game-winning play right here in my hand. The spices dancing on my taste buds. The crispness is unreal. The crunch giving away to that tender, succulent meat. The magical wood-fired flavor from the Pit Boss. It's like a celebration of barbecue in my mouth. A touchdown of taste. A championship of flavor. It's a symphony of taste and texture. Touchdown! The ultimate game day feast. Only on Pit Boss.
I think the 5+11 format, if you have to expand, and I personally don't even think there's enough evidence to say we should even do that. I would prefer to wait longer, but everyone else seems to disagree. There's something that feels very American and fair about not allocating guaranteed spots to anybody other than whoever wins a conference championship. It feels egalitarian and correct to say just win as many games as you can and be in this at-large pool. And if you don't have as much financial leverage against the Big Ten and the SEC, and Yormark doesn't right now, the Big 12 doesn't. In some ways, I'd argue they have even less than the ACC, which really doesn't right now. Then play to the public's sense of fairness. The idea of saying that these 4 spots are guaranteed to the SEC in perpetuity doesn't seem fair unless you're unless you're a Vegas bookmaker or a recruiting analyst or tied to an SEC institution. So you use the leverage you've got when you don't have a lot. Use this argument. It makes a lot of sense. It's not shocked the ACC is doing the same thing.
Do you think Tony Petitti just sits back with a glass of wine or something as he just lets Sankey say everything? He has some of the input in this too. Even Sankey's brought that up, and just like chilling because nobody's throwing any darts at him or his conference.
I think that's exactly what it is. And if I was Sankey, honestly, I would be saving more of my darts for that. rather than getting up here and yelling at media members who dare to insinuate that maybe Alabama wasn't chosen by God to perpetually be in the college football playoff. You've got 2 people that are mostly agree on many of these deeply unpopular consolidation of power attempts, whether that's with college football playoff access, whether that's with access to the NCAA basketball tournament, whether that's postseason access or even percentage of votes within NCAA governance itself. And for whatever reason, whether these 2 talked about it or this is Sankey's just comfortable with this or whatever, Sankey's the only guy that goes up with the plaid sports jacket in front of a microphone and says, here are the ideas that I believe in, which you all hate. Boo me, your boos sustain me. And as a reporter, I appreciate that because that's more fundamentally honest. Even if I hate the ideas, I appreciate that he's got the conviction to come up there and say it. And Tony doesn't. And honestly, I can tell you here as a guy in Big Ten country, that's kind of the case, period. Right? Like the Big Ten headquarters is 15 minutes from my house. I barely talk to the guy. And you have less access to Big Ten, secondary staffers than I might with many smaller conferences or even other P4 institutions. I think that's exactly what he's doing, sitting there in his sweater vest and his quarter zip and enjoying a beverage and letting somebody else take the slings and arrows. I don't really see how that's acceptable. I'm just as frustrated with people in Chicago as I am down south.
I saw a tweet the other day of somebody, missing the years of Jim Delaney, which I always kind of thought like, man, this guy's kind of pompous the way he speaks about his league. But at least, again, to the point about Sankey, at least he spoke about it. At least we know where he stands on this. You don't just throw out, like, they've thrown out a proposal for automatic qualifiers and then said nothing about it. Like, not this their thing. It would be like a congressman putting out a bill and they're like, oh, so why'd you write this bill? Oh, you'll figure it out.
Yeah, it's a little secret. I understand that. I don't want to necessarily get in front of a microphone and say I'm pining for the days of Delaney because I think there's a lot of things that Delaney did in the Big Ten that were deeply frustrating, and the where he could be a staunch traditionalist until it was no longer served his interest, and then he would flip immediately. But you're right. He would look you in the eye and say, this is what I think. And he was also somebody that would not be afraid to get on the phone and scream at his own members and saying stop fighting in public. I think if you look back at what happened in the very beginning of the Kevin Warren era, and like with COVID, with ADs and presidents sniping at each other and calling in their own state AGs, that would not have happened under Delaney, because Delaney would have made it clear somehow that, like, if you do this, I'm sending your school the next bus back to the American Athletic Conference. Like, that's not how we do things here. And that's not, we haven't had that leadership out of the Big Ten since then. I think it is important for leaders in these kind of jobs where you get paid a lot of money and you have a lot of responsibility and you are in many ways a public figure, to be able to get in front of the microphone and put away the platitudes and say what you think. And then we can all have a grown-up conversation about those ideas. I've criticized some of the ideas that come out of the Big 12. I think there's a lot of good things that come out of that conference office. God bless them. They're willing to also just say stuff and try a bunch of things and play that leverage in public and in private. The SEC does that as well, sometimes deeply frustrating, but at least it happens. The Big Ten doesn't do that. And make no mistake, like, those conversations are still happening. They're just happening outside the scope of open records legislation or in the open where we can talk about them.
Matt, where's the House settlement?
Hanging out somewhere with Carmen Sandiego. Like, I mean, it's the same thing as the last time we talked, right? We've got the papers. Wilkins got everything she needed. I legitimately thought there would have been a very good chance that at 4:30, Pacific time, right before a 3-day weekend, that she would have dropped something. After every other reporter was 2 cocktails deep, and then I gotta go blog now. But she didn't, which I appreciate. It could happen tomorrow. It could happen in 3 days. It could never happen, right? Like the second coming of our Lord, no man knoweth the hour. The House settlement will come like a thief in the night. Just be ready.
Oh, God, that's awesome.
Matt, the trailer dropped today.
It did.
There are some exciting features that they have added to EA Sports College Football 26. The coaches, actual coaches, I think is really cool. I mean, probably doesn't affect the gameplay all that much because their playbooks essentially were already in there, but I know that they've enhanced that. I did notice that they are going to make transfers a little bit more random in the dynasty mode, which I will enjoy, because I can tell you through 26 years of a very powerful Florida State dynasty, once I got good, once I started winning, I never got transfers. Like, it just doesn't happen. Like, people just don't leave. I mean, and I get it. I wouldn't want to leave me either, but I would appreciate more realism in the game.
I think it's a really difficult needle to thread, particularly with how roster building and recruiting and to some extent NIL work in the game. Because I tell everybody, and I'm sure you three understand this better than I think a lot of other fans, if we had a completely 100% realistic depiction of what recruiting and roster management is like in the video game, everybody would freaking hate it, because it wouldn't be fun. It would be, I got to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and negotiate with some 16-year-olds. I have to with some uncle's, cousin's, bagman's, lawyer, agent person, and trying to figure out who's lying and recognize that relationships or scouting or these other skill sets aren't really part of the game. You would not enjoy that. It would be a gigantic spreadsheet, and you would just be pushing a button whether you had money or not. So you have to take some liberties. I am cautiously optimistic that though there will be some tweaks to address some of the I think limitations and problems with dynasty mode and recruiting from last year. The things that I heard from community members the most for after the release of last year's game, I think were mostly addressed, but not either in the trailer or in the blog announcement today. You got a trophy room now. They've added a lot more mascots. You can do formation subs rather than trying to manually put in all of your freshmen when you're up by 84 points and you don't want everyone to go get ACL injuries. There's a lot more quality of life changes here. I will say, like, there's an event in Orlando today where a couple of our colleagues are playing the game for reasons that I don't think I can get into on the air now. I'm not there, as you can see. I hope to get the stick soon, but I'm not expecting a enormously different product, but I think there's reason to be optimistic it will improve from last year.
Matt, you wrote, this is just a couple of days ago, the potential college sports Washington bombshell that not enough people are considering. Would you share that with the audience?
I would be happy to. We've spent so much of the last 2.5, 3 years talking about antitrust litigation and enforcement against the NCAA itself, right? The antitrust grounds that prohibit or may prohibit the NCAA from enforcing various NIL rules or restrictions on trade. What we haven't talked about here really is the idea of lawmakers going after conferences for unfair restraints of trade or access, or for disproportionate market power, which has happened before. During the BCS era, was Senator Orrin Hatch out of Utah, who's since passed away, and he raised hell over the BCS passing over Utah and allegedly discriminating against Mountain West institutions. And I don't want to say that Senator Hatch killed the BCS because he didn't, but those threats and some of that paperwork, I believe, did play a role in the creation of this playoff structure. What I think is important to realize is that if we're looking at an era where the Big Ten and the SEC are saying we need even more NCAA governance power, and maybe we want guaranteed spots in the college football playoff, and maybe we only want to play each other, and maybe we want to inch closer and closer to a kind of breakaway here, that there are a lot of politicians who represent constituents like the Big 12 institutions or Mountain West institutions or ACC schools that might say, I don't think that should be legal. And if we look at who's on the leading figures on the Senate Antitrust Committee, it's a bunch of guys in Utah and North Carolina and some kind of heterodox conservative antitrust folks that could make things very difficult for the Big Ten or the SEC, especially since those guys are begging Congress for favors. So just like with anything else, you have to be careful how hard you push, because if you push too much too far, there's a chance that there'll be another force pushing back on you here. And in this case, I think we can't eliminate the possibility that it could come from Congress.
Where do you think, I mean, after we talked about the committee before, that's not going to happen, at least now, where do you think the legislation comes into a part of that getting knocked down? Or was it more that, they kind of got announced and then Nick Saban's like, I don't know if I really want to do this. It seems like it's going to take away from a lot of my golf.
And television time and eating Little Debbie's and the whole thing.
Yeah.
I'll tell you the best of what I've been able to put together is the White House wanted this thing. They didn't really talk about it super closely with folks like Senator Lee or Senator Cruz or other folks here within the Senate, but also the co-chair of this proposed commission, Cody Campbell, Texas Tech Board of Regents guy, he's written in public saying, I don't think the Big Ten and SEC should get to control everything. Maybe we should amend the Sports Broadcasting Act so we can combine everyone's television rights into one contract, and then you take away this incentive for conference realignment, so we don't have to have a league that goes from Orlando to Morgantown to Salt Lake City. And that idea has some political currency, and it scares the hell out of the Big Ten and the SEC. And I think once they saw Campbell, communicating that he has expansive thoughts about college sports reform besides NIL, there was some back channel lawyering and lobbying, and now things are on hold. One thing I have learned, and I say this not to be partisan, I'm just saying this here like as straight down the middle as I can here as a reporter. The Trump White House does a lot of stuff. And it does a lot of stuff, and it undoes a lot of stuff, and changes its mind, and it's unpredictable. And how something is set up last week might not be how it ends in a month. Sometimes it's negotiating in public. Sometimes it's chaotic on purpose. Sometimes it's not. And I don't think college sports can be viewed any differently than how it's approaching trade policy or domestic policy or higher education policy.
Matt, great stuff. Again, go to Extra Points. In fact, I renewed mine.
Thank you.
I'm online. They sent me an email. I think it was. Does this sound right? Like $84 for the year?
$84 a year gets you everything. You can subscribe for just a month for $9. I will have a video game story up first thing tomorrow, and we're going to have some really big news coming these next couple of weeks. So if you're interested in this kind of stuff, stick with me here. I'm confident we'll find a way to earn your $9.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it. It's worth it. Thank you,
bet.
Matt Brown. Extra Points with us on many things, 365 Sports.